Starting, and I think we've started. It says we're started. It says we're live. So, hello everyone. I'm John from It's More Than Just Gaming.com, and today I am here with Chris and Joaquin from Twin Cities by Night. Could you give us a wave and say hello, both of you guys?
Hello, how's it going? This is Chris.
Hello, this is Joaquin.
Hi there. Um, I think the first thing I should probably say is Twin Cities by Night is a YouTube channel and it's an iTunes podcast. Is it on any other platforms at the minute?
It's actually should be on all podcast platforms right now. So definitely
Awesome.
that's the spearhead of our stuff right there is the podcast format.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay. For the benefit of the people who haven't heard of you before, tell us what is Twin Cities by Night.
So Twin Cities by Night is a podcast slash YouTube channel actual play where we focus more on podcast and we role play. We started role playing World of Darkness game lines such as Vampire the Masquerade, Victorian Age Vampire, and other Chronicles of Darkness games. And then eventually we're just starting now to move into other horror themed games such as Call of Cthulhu. But we are an actual play that likes to focus on the horror aspect of games and also more of the character development slash story driven aspects of these games here. So that is us in a nutshell.
Awesome. And how many members do you have in the Twin Cities by Night gang now? Because it's grown quite considerably over the last few years that you've been running.
Yes, we started out with 5 players, and then we sort of grew up to what we have now. But I think we have 10 members of our group.
And do all of your members, did they all know each other beforehand, or?
No.
Okay, go on. Tell us more.
Okay. So basically, for me, it started. I was in college. I was looking at the looking for group subreddit, which basically just lists like wanted ads for saying, "Hey, you want to play a role playing game? Here's where you look. Here's where to sign up." And I saw this ad for a Vampire the Masquerade game. I was like, I never played it before, but I was looking for a group to do something with because I was bored. So I was like, I'm gonna try it. Send in an application. So then me and Chris talked a little bit about what we're gonna do with this thing, and it just sort of snowballed from there.
So you sent an application and you got the job then.
That's not something I've heard a lot in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, then kind of from there, we originally started with me running the first game with Quinn being one of the players and then 3 others. And then we kind of expanded when we started out branching to run different stories. And we slowly picked up individuals, and we all really didn't know each other in person. And it was kind of just like fate, like that's kind of like hyperbole right there, but fate brought us together to tell scary stories. But that's pretty much what happened there. And then we just got, like eventually it just became where like we put out a call for people. We had like application process and we selected people. And yeah, we just keep getting stronger and stronger with this. And we got a wide variety of different playing styles and personalities that just kind of, it's weird. For 3 years, we've just been clicking, and it's like we just all know how to deal with each other now. It's a pretty amazing thing if we think about it.
Yeah, Twin Cities by Night is actually one of the 2 actual plays that I currently watch. One of the other ones is a sort of like a semi. This is going to sound like a back. This is going to sound a little bit insulting. It's really not meant to be. The other ones are, and I'm going to use air quotes, professional one. With like production budgets and stuff like that. Twin Cities by Night is the one that I've actually devoted a lot of time to watching, because I actually started watching it myself last August, because all the TV series I liked were on their summer break and whatnot. And so I thought, I need something to do. And suddenly I thought, you know what? This fellow Chris that keeps on banging on about Twin Cities by Night and hassling me on Twitter and stuff like that, maybe I'll actually watch it for a change. And I went in and looked at it and I thought, yeah, why not? And yeah, that's how I've come to meet Chris and Joaquin here from watching their stuff. And actually, I recommend it. So I'm going to be sticking links in below the video and in the blog that accompanies us this article. You said you've branched out into other games like Chronicles of Darkness and Call of Cthulhu, but Vampire the Masquerade was your first one. What made you choose that particularly?
I chose Vampire because it was actually the only game I had ever ran or played, really. I think off the top of my head, I had ran it in 2000, like 99 to 2001, if memory serves me right, and then just kind of quit playing it. And I just got the urge to do it in 2016 again. So it was just kind of what I knew. And I kind of took a story that I ran that I vaguely remember the general premise for, and just kind of like took that and just ran with it, and it was just what I knew at the time, to be honest with you. And it just kind of like, it was weird. It was just like, for anyone who knows me, Quinn can attest to this, and the other gang members or friends who may be listening, that like when I get into something, I get like into something, so like if I get motivated to do something, I get freaking motivated. Can I curse in here? But I get motivated. And so
it's fine, you can curse.
Okay, so
I can attest to this, because if he gets passionate about something, you'll have to be prepared for some kind of like 20-minute rant about something, unless you cut him off midstream, which is hard to do. It's hard to find the right. It's like a hot air balloon. You have to find the right point to poke it.
Just like he did right there. He just did that. If you subtly noticed it, but yes, it was a passion of love, and so it's just what I knew, and that's why originally. So.
I'm also going to just confirm exactly what Joaquin just said, because this is the second time we've tried to record this conversation. The first time the technology let me down badly, or rather I let everyone else down badly, or the technology, or it didn't work. And Chris was very passionate for about the better part of 2 hours, and it was only Joaquin who could actually shut him up.
That's the truth.
It's a skill I've had to learn out of necessity.
Yeah,
there's 10 people who know how to do that. The 9 members of Twin Cities by Night and my wife, and those are like the only people who know how to do that.
Yes, fair enough. Okay, Joaquin, you actually run, or you were in the first story arc, but you also ran the Victorian Age vampire.
Yes, I was actually the first. Yes, I was actually the first member of our group to run a game aside from Chris, because previously up to that point, it had just been him running Twin Cities by Night for us, and then we branched out to something called Juarez. And then around the same time, he started doing another game. So he was run 3 different games. It was a confusing mess at the time. But so luckily, at that point, I was like, well, I've got this idea in my head sort of percolating. I was like, well, why don't I give it a try?
Yeah, and it was your first time running a game, wasn't it?
Yes. It was my first time ever running any kind of role-playing game at all. And so I was just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be nervous, but I'm going to have to deal with this. Because I got this idea in my head and I need to get it out. And basically the story behind it was kind of, at the time, at the time, it was actually, there was this video game, Bloodborne, I had been interested in. And for those of you who don't know what this is, basically it's a video game all about this town called Yharnam, in which this, basically, people sort of discover like to use blood to heal themselves. It was like a combination of medicine and a drug. And sort of like it corrupts them. And so basically you like have to navigate this whole horrific, blood-drenched Gothic city. And so just the imagery of it, like Gothic spires and like spiked fences and walls all over the place, the moon shining down on everything, that imagery of it all, it struck me. And so I wanted to sort of like have like a role play, have a game sort of like hitting some of the same notes of that. Making sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense to me. Just as a viewer, it was actually the Victorian Age that actually got my attention first, because Victorian Age London is actually kind of the peak time in the Vampire the Masquerade canon for the Nosferatu clan. And the Nosferatu are my absolute favorite clan in the game. And you had like the Camarilla Fagans running the back streets of London with their little criminal children gangs and things. And I thought, oh, someone's doing an actual play of Victorian Age. And actually, these are people I've heard of before. So yeah, I dipped into it. So actually, let's digress a slight bit away from Twin Cities by Night towards your personal experience as a storyteller. What were your challenges as a first-time storyteller?
Okay, so first, definitely the first time is just knowing when you had enough material. Because as a first-time storyteller, I wasn't really sure, how much is enough. Because what we do is we record for like 3-hour sessions each time, and then we later on we decide to edit them into like 1-hour videos for easier for the podcast and listeners. So when I got to it, I was like, okay, so I have enough stuff. Okay, that's several sessions. I don't know how fast it's gonna go. And then I have to try to figure out. Okay, so do I have enough stuff to last the whole session, and do I have enough stuff to last the whole game? And so that's the first time I don't have to go on with what we did with. I just relied on my experience with Chris. Is just what did we actually get to do in our Twin Cities by Night game? So I had to sort of guess. Okay, because here's a tip: is that if you really get into the role playing part of it, conversations can take a lot of more time than you think.
Oh yes, they can.
And so I found that so I was nervous, but then we ran the first session. And I was like, okay, I was worried because we were moving along at a pace. I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna run out of stuff for the first session. I'm gonna need to make up stuff. But then as we progressed and sort of I got to the middle part, I was like, oh no, they're actually they're not just walking out. They're not splitting up trying to just kill everything inside. They're actually taking the time to look through things. Let's talk about stuff. I was like, oh, thank you. Yes, I got enough stuff. I can relax.
To add to that a little bit too, you mentioned Quinn, this was the first time he was storytelling. We also had Adam, who story told for the first time ever. He did a Changeling the Lost story. And even I've heard what I'm about to say from from Mitch, who's running Demon, and Craig, who ran a Call of Cthulhu one shot, who's about to run another one actually for us this Saturday. One common thing I hear is, which is natural for experienced and non-experienced storytellers doing actual play, is the nervousness of knowing that people are going to be listening, oh, hey, people are going to be listening, how are they going to react? And the one thing, and it took me a little bit to learn what I'm about to say. What I told them is have trust in the players, because us as a group, we all have the same goal, and that we want to have fun, but we want to tell a good story together. So I've had times where I feel that the players have stepped up, you know what I mean, and kind of elevated a story for me when I was kind of maybe feeling a little flat. So that's one thing that I think has helped a lot of the storytellers, including myself in the group, is that we know we can count on the players. The players aren't going to sit there and just be not you know what I mean, not trying to progress the story or be difficult, or they're going to have the character motivations. Don't get me wrong, they'd be playing the game, but it's a good back and forth. And when you said conversation, Joaquin, and that's what really it reminds me of too, knowing where you're okay, you can trust on these guys, they're going to add to it, and they're going to want to elevate your ideas also.
Cool. What sort of challenges have you both faced? Actually, I think you've more or less answered that, but have you faced any other challenges running the game as an actual play that you might not have faced if you were just doing it as a virtual tabletop or as a round an actual tabletop?
The challenge, no. And I don't want to sound pretentious or anything like that, because to be honest, I have more experience running online than I actually do in person. But and I tell people this too, when people listen to Twin Cities by Night, or just when people watch any other actual play online, I always this may harm us, this may make people not want to listen to us or whatever, but I always say don't expect your home game to go like an actual play that you see online. And that's because when we meet Sundays to play for 3 hours, right, we know that we are there to play. We know that people listen, and we are focused, right? But when you have a home game, you know what I mean? There may be a guy who wants to order a pizza. There may be someone who's not 100% into the scene. It can happen, you know what I mean? But I just feel that I have an unfair advantage, I guess, being an actual play, because I have players who know what they're there for at that moment. You know what I mean? And they know that we'll talk afterwards and we'll talk beforehand, but when we're playing for the most part. And so the challenge is really I feel I don't know, man. I really don't feel there's been any challenges as a storyteller, to be honest with you, other than logistics. But what storyteller doesn't have that? But when it comes to in game, like I really feel I feel in good hands. I feel like the players are there invested, and I just feel like they want to have fun. And I just feel like we all are syncing right now as a group. We've been syncing for like the last year and a half, dude. Just really feel like we're gelling like we've never gelled before.
Cool. Joaquin, did you think? Do you agree with that, or did you find any challenges running it as an actual play?
No, I can't really tell because I've only ever run the games for our podcast, so
Okay.
I only have one to select from. But what I have listened to several other role playing actual plays, and what I find that what we do have. And I've heard I've gone to like a convention and overheard some of the people playing games there. And one of the big things is that I don't want to say they're more the home games are more relaxed, but it's like there's not this almost because when you're recording, everyone has sort of has this idea like, oh yeah, there's recording there. I don't want to say anything that's gonna be out there for everyone else to see. You don't want to hear something stupid or say something too out there that the internet will find and record forever. And so when you're at like a home game, it's more just like, yeah, you could just talk about whatever, make dirty jokes, tell offensive jokes, just goof off, talk about different stuff. What two people are having a scene over about the side, you just turn to the guy to your left, just whisper and like, oh yeah, just talk about work, anything like that. It's just a different sort of atmosphere, I guess you could say, and how much side chatter is acceptable.
I think I actually completely understand that. A friend of mine wanted to do a recording for our local radio station of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's with a group that I routinely roleplay with myself. And actually, from my perspective, when we did the recording, I actually enjoyed playing in that group at that point because it was much more disciplined. And I'm not meaning that role-playing games need to be disciplined, but you're quite right. A home game is much more relaxed, and you do get the banter and the silly jokes and the jokes that are perhaps not appropriate for the internet and whatnot. And that's all fine in the context, so long as it's not actually making anyone uncomfortable. But sometimes banter can be too much of a distraction for the likes of for some players. For me, so actually, yeah, I get how it can be advantageous for you. So yeah, completely understand that. So let's actually drift back to Twin Cities by Night. Tell me, because you've both mentioned other groups and other actual plays, what would you say is Twin Cities by Night's unique selling point over any of the other actual plays out there? Chris, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to give an example of what someone had said about us who I kind of hold in high regard. And I guess I'm not going to like name names. It'd be kind of tacky, but there are a couple people who do actual plays who I know listen to us. I think some have paid lip service to us, just thinking that they say our name or whatever, and people will be like, "Oh yeah," but I think that there are some who listen to us. And one, I'll say his name because he did a review, and he made a tweet about us, and I asked to retweet it and everything. His name's Uncle Yo. He does these I don't know how to explain it. They're really awesome, like podcast story versions of Chronicles of Darkness games. He puts a lot of work into it. He actually does like tabletop comedy, like at conventions and everything like that. And I was totally baffled. I was totally blown away when he said he listened to us, because he sent me a random PM on Facebook asking if I was going to Gen Con so he could buy me a beer, or if anyone else from TCBN was going to Gen Con so he could buy us a beer. I'm like, what the fuck? This is like the Uncle Yo. This is the guy who had like clout when we started. You know what I mean? And he said one thing that he said is he liked that in a nutshell, and I paraphrase, that he liked the seriousness of our games, and that we didn't have to rely on pop culture references and like outlandish stuff to like have people watch us. And to me, I think, we have our moments. You've watched our stuff. We have our moments where we have really serious scenes. We feel we got to like laugh out of character just to kind of like recenter. But we are an actual play that tackles serious horror, realistic themes in a way that it is not edgelord, and is a way that's respectable to the themes that we're exploring. And I feel that it brings me, and I'm not one to compliment myself, and I have a really hard time taking compliments, but it's one that I've come to accept. That I will say that is I'm super proud of the fact that a lot of the themes that we tackle, a lot of the hard subjects we tackle, a lot of the horror we tackle, we do it like storytellers, man. And that kind of goes back to like a little bit to the last question you asked. Like one thing that we have up, as a storyteller doing an actual play and recording is that we are all showing up with the intent and purpose of knowing that we together are going to do that. And I think when people listen to us, they know that they're going to get horror. They know that they're going to get seriousness. And not that there's anything wrong with people on a run like more lighthearted pop culture, fake fangs, that anime type, whatever stuff. That's just not us, dude. And so I feel like people know when they come to Twin Cities by Night, they're coming for a serious story that tackles hard themes, but is not gratuitous.
All right. Yeah, and I agree with that. And I also say that another part is that one of the things we do sometimes explore, like I have in my own game, like some of the more mystic or the like the stranger sides of the vampire, like occultism, the lore behind it. But what we would do is like we always try to find, okay, so because in the whole Vampire the Masquerade lore, the whole big idea behind where vampires come from is that they are the descendants of Cain from the biblical story. And so for like in the books, they just straight out tell you that's what they believe. And so for us, we always try to find it's just treated as more like, yeah, that's the lore that the vampires tell each other, but it's that's old history, if it's even real or not. That we don't know. We're vampires. What the hell do we care what happened 5,000 years ago? It's not really something that we need to worry about.
Yeah, we run very small scale, kind of like focus on like the more, especially in vampire, more elements of like the humanity and like the losing yourself to the beast and like trying to survive. And Quinn, yeah, that's a good point you brought up. It's almost like how some people look at religion nowadays. If it's hard for me to rationalize how a vampire who's been a vampire for 10 years will automatically believe in today's society that like 5,000 years ago Cain was the first vampire, where in my perception, it would be their main concerns like how am I going to kill people by not controlling my hunger? How am I going to like not break the masquerade? How am I going to like, you know what I mean? Like deal with the depression that the changes that are going through me. So we also, yeah, I like that. That's a perfect point, Quinn. That's we don't do the big picture stuff in our games too much,
So no shootouts between Camarilla and Sabbat in our games.
Say again.
So no big shootouts between Sabbat and Camarilla in our games, the two main factions of vampires. Like big craziness.
And we like to take interesting takes on stuff too. You know what I mean? Like interesting outtakes on stuff that's been that's been done over and over again. My favorite role in Vampire the Masquerade is a loss of humanity role, a conscience role, because I feel like that can change the trajectory of a story. But you'll find that in our other games that aren't even vampire. You'll find like in our other games, that it's like very like character driven, I guess would be a good way to say it.
Cool. So for folks that are listening, that's going to make Twin Cities by Night sound brutal, dark, serious. For the literary critics or students out there, I'd say possibly elements of realism in there, as much as you can get in a role-playing game about vampirism. If you're wondering, there is a fair bit of humor in the actual plays as well. Banter between the players, screw-ups that the characters make, poor choices that the characters make. And I see Quinn nodding his head there. Yes, I'm looking at you. I'm not going to spoil that there. Sorry, I've got an itchy leg and I'm just scratching it. Yes. For me, the seriousness of the stories actually really did hammer home the horror aspect of it, and the interpersonal relationships that were getting more and more messed up as the chronicles advanced, because it really advanced the idea that yes, a vampire is a monster and everything they touch is ruined by their interaction, even when they have the best of intentions. And sometimes it's ruined quite catastrophically badly. watch Joaquin's dog in the Vampire the Masquerade actual play, because that was fantastic. I'm saying no more. It was brilliant. What tips would you give to other GMs of horror games in creating horror stories?
All right, so I would say that for me, the number one thing that for horror and really any storyteller is just make sure that if you get to places to set the expectation of what the game is going to be about. And this is especially true for horror because it's a bit, because for horror is a bit harder to achieve in a game than, like, say, adventure or exciting moments of action, because I guess you could say that once you know you're playing in a horror story, people sort of have this idea of, okay, so I'm not gonna actually know. I'm gonna buy all the guns and go down with a flamethrower attached to my back and a shotgun in my hand. So they know to sort of I guess it'll allow the players to sort of set their expectations and sort of help them know the guidelines of how to behave in the story.
Yeah, for sure. You got to be like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You got to be like an open book with it. You got to tell like the players what they, and we do that a lot now too when we pitch different stories. Like, hey, I'm going to run a game that it deals with these themes and these these themes. It might have a little of this, it might have a little of that. Two examples of that involving Quinn and myself is when Quinn ran Chronicles of Darkness one shot called Lover in the Ice, which originally I think was Call of Cthulhu, but he converted it to Chronicles of Darkness. And he was up front like, hey, this is going to have some kind of sexual horror to it. And, just so you know, before you say you're going to play, and everyone knew what they're getting into. By the way, handled it superbly. I loved how he did that as a storyteller. I learned a lot by watching how he did that. And then, for example, I just wrapped up last Sunday our Ghouls Fatal Addiction miniseries. And I was very upfront, like, hey, this is going to have Bret Easton Ellis, like, type of like American Psycho type stuff, and have some Clive Barker type stuff in there. And it's going to be like really going to try to not like try to touch a nerve just to like touch a nerve, but it's going to may have some stuff in there because I'm going to show like the existence of ghouls and how it's fucked and how you kind of tapped into vampires ruin shit they touch with inadvertently or advertently. So you just be upfront and people are going to know, you know what I mean? And players will communicate back to you. Like the way you have a game called Ultimate Evil, the Chronicles of Darkness one I ran, and after Dread, the next arc's going to happen. And I was talking to the players in that. And I'm like, hey, I would like to do one-on-one like catch-ups. Like, hey, this is what happened between the two arcs with each player. And one of the players, and I'll respect him, said to me, I rather not, because that game's really fucking intense. I don't know if I could sit there for an hour and do emotionally intense, not like graphically intense, but emotionally intense. He's like, I don't know if I could do an hour of one-on-one on that. And I was like, okay. And I respected that 100%, So communication is key, like Quinn said also, I feel, at least. Yeah.
Okay. So that's tips on running a horror game and doing it respectfully to the genre. Any tips that you would give to a games master or storyteller to actually just sort of like add that little bit of flavor in game to sort of like get the players on the edge of their seats to basically give you the same sort of emotional impact as the spooky music starting to play in the horror movie, short of actually having spooky music playing in the background, of course.
Right, definitely. Yeah. I would say, especially if you want to run a Vampire the Masquerade game, for example, one of the best things you can do is to sort of like sneak in the idea that even though you're the main characters in the story, you're doing stuff, you may not be the good guys in the end. Because I know that, for example, in this is something that I'm going to tease a little bit for something I'm going to have in the future.
Ooh.
It's the second arc of Diluted, the sort of Victorian Age vampire game I ran. Whenever it happens, it's in the list somewhere. And so basically, one of the things that's going to happen is that in the background, there's going to be a cholera outbreak among the mortals of 1848. There's an actual thing that happened back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the vampires, there's like, well, okay, so they don't really care. They're just like, it's killing off our food. Make sure don't bite anyone that's infected, and just try to keep. If you do get by someone, you have to only feed off the infected people. basically like they're like, oh, it's inconvenient, but they don't really care that all these people are dying from disease. They don't care if they can try to treat it. For them, it's just like, well, just screw the humans. Just make sure it doesn't affect us. And so ultimately, even if the characters do whatever the heck they want themselves to do, humans they're still screwed.
Cool. Chris?
Yeah, I would say by far set the scene. Setting the scene is like just from my experience, man, like setting the scene will build the anticipation of what's going to happen. And you may even like catch people. And if you don't mind, I'd like to give like a couple examples from when I have ran games where I feel like, okay, I did this, right. The first one by happenstance was just like it was one of those situations where the players went off a beaten path, and I was kind of like not expecting it, but I knew it might be potentially seen in the future. And that was the introduction of Roman Dunsern in the first story arc. But in retrospect, after that happened, I don't want to spoil too much, but he came. The first scene of him was very, very, very graphic and intense, and it was just like I felt that. Kind of was like I looked at that and I was like, I could have done that better. You know what I mean? And I kind of like thought about that in future scenes where I want to have impact. And a couple of scenes where I feel like, okay, I may have done this right was one was in Dread when Katow at the beginning of Dread when Katow went and found Jonathan Chase's ghoul. And I'm not going to say too much about that, but I remember I recently re-listened to it because I re-listened to her shit a lot just to like learn from like what I did before. And I was re-listening to the part how I was describing him walking up to the bar before he saw what was behind the bar. And that was one where that I was really happy with how that went. And then another two were just random scenes that end up happening. One was when Katow was about to frenzy, he had a feed. He was trying to like go in a house, you know what I mean? And he was trying to like get into a house to feed, and he was making these frenzy checks. And it was just like this. It was just this anticipation because he had one challenge after another, after another, after another, and he was very close to frenzying, which could have been really fucking bad. And the final one that I was really happy with was when Warren botched his astral projection roll. And he kind of like lost himself almost. And you have to like kind of see where, I guess as a storyteller, you have to see where sometimes it's planned, but sometimes you have to see an opportunity where it lies, right? And what I try to do is I try to look at it. I'm looking at, okay, if something bad happens, how can this progress in a horrific theme, right? Well, obviously you have a fucking vampire who's whatever Katow was down to 3 or 2 blood pool points, you know what I mean? Almost frenzied on this girl who he's trying to save, who's in a car, passed out, and now he's in the middle of a suburban neighborhood creeping like a fucking thief in the night, you know what I mean? And some suburban could easily have frenzied in that house and, you know what I mean, lost his humanity. That's a lot of traumatic shit that can happen there. And then the with the Warren thing with the botch roll, that's something that not only could I make scary, but I could also progress the story with. So it's all about setting though. If you would imagine those scenes or any other scene in our games that I didn't run that were scary, and if I was just like Roman Dunsern, you see a guy, or you know what I mean, or you almost fucking frenzy, but you find someone to drink from, that's like not scary, right? Like Joaquin's not going to be a player in that game, and be like, you just had me roll dice to find someone, I found someone, and that's fine. No, it's just building that anticipation and that edge and that edge and that edge and then that edge and that edge. And you just have to be patient, man. You just got to be patient and don't rely on shock all the time. Shock's fine once in a while, but don't rely shocking all the time because your players are eventually going to become, what's the word? Yeah, they're going to build a tolerance to it. They're like, oh God, another Roman Dunsern. Oh God, you know what I mean? Like, seriously.
I see. The third time someone was hung upside down with their entrails out. Oh come on.
Yeah. I know, but yeah, really, for real. So you got to find creative ways because there's more. We have a podcast called the Brian Diaries where I interviewed where I interviewed a pal of mine, Brendan Carrion from Full Metal RPG, and he's like loves horror. We just talked about like horror and using horror in games and World of Darkness games, and there's so many flavors of horror. You know what I mean? There's body horror, there's mental horror. You know what I mean? There's abuse, surviving horror. There's just so many different things that you can bring out that can bring out that little like, you know what I mean? Like that. There's so many ways to do it, and so many interesting takes and flavors. And think about this: you have 4 or 5 characters in a game, you have 4 or 5 different personalities that you can use to tap into that, their fears, their whatever, and someone's going to be able to connect to it. And there's been games that I've ran where I've afterwards it felt like bad. You know what I mean? Like I felt bad for like some of the things that happened in the game, or NPCs like Lenny's coach, hockey coach in Dread, just ones I do not at all enjoy playing, but I realize that it adds that horrific element to the story. So you got to be, I don't know, you got to be like dynamic in it. You got to look at the different ways, look at movies, look at books, look at so much of the shit. I'm sure if people went and watched a bunch of horror movies and read horror books and then went back and listened to us, would be like, oh, that's a ripoff of that. That's a ripoff of that. And I don't give a fuck. They can say that. It probably is. But it's like there's just so much inspiration out there.
Moving on.
Sorry. Sorry, I can talk about this all day, every day.
Move on.
That's the crisp stopwatch, is it?
We need the light. We need the red light or whatever. Oh, shit. Okay.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, and something you said in there actually struck a chord with me, because I've got an article coming out in the next couple of weeks on my website. That's shameless plug. That's part of my Games Masters Toolkit series called Mimesis, which is just a fancy way of saying showing. It's something I learned about when I was at uni a few years back. Showing, I studied English literature and creative writing, which is why you might expect that I really enjoy role-playing games, because actually I've written entire articles about how the relationship between reader and writer is exactly the same as the relationship that happens in a role-playing game. And a role-playing game is a fantastic analogy for your audience participation. And mimesis is where you show the reader what's happening rather than telling them. So rather than saying, oh, it's another Roman Dunsern, it's yes, you see a person doing this. And as I recall, you described it quite vividly in that scene, and the players didn't have a clue what's going on. I did, because I know what that surname means.
Yep.
Yeah, I've read that clown book. I know exactly what that means, what was going to happen to that prisoner, and also who his likely enemies are. Spoilers, not going to tell you. Yeah, that's cool. So what can we expect from Twin Cities by Night for the future? What's your phase 4 after what's your phase 4 sort of thing, to use a Marvel analogy?
I know, yeah, right. Phase 4 Twin Cities by Night is 3 story arcs that are gonna happen. One's already happening, and others can be happening soon. And so 3 of them. The first one's Demon the Fallen Fragments. Demon the Fallen Fragments is a Demon the Fallen game that's ran by Mitch, the Man of Many Voices, and our group, set in 2001 in Rochester, New York. The players in that are Slavic, Adam, Becca, and Tillman. So they're running that. They just the second session is actually being released this week as we speak. The episodes of that, which is awesome. And then in April, the character creation sessions for Slavic's Chronicles of Darkness Inferno game is called Temptation, is going to be released. And that is a game that is taking place during the Hussite Wars during the 15th century, where 2 players are going to be playing humans and 2 players are going to be playing demons that are like trying to manipulate them during the Hussite Wars. I'm probably butchering that, but I'm a player in that. I'm going to be playing a human, and Craig is going to be playing a human, and then also the demons are going to be played by Joaquin here, and I still haven't seen the character creation video for that in Tillman. They're going to be playing demons.
You shouldn't. You're not allowed to.
I'm not going to. I'm not editing it. I'm not touching it. I'm not doing any of that because I'm playing in it. And then whenever Dread wraps up, which is going to be in 2019, the second story arc of our Chronicles of Darkness game, The Ultimate Evil, is going to be happening. It's going to be called Institutionalized. It takes place in 1987 in Bismarck, North Dakota, and deals with like the Satanic Panic and stuff like that. It's a game that's really close to my heart because it like takes place in a town that I lived in for a bit when I was a child and my parents are from. So I'm really excited about that. And then we got one-shots that are happening. Matter of fact, we just wrapped up our mini-series for Ghoul's Fatal Addiction Servitude, which is going to be released next week. That turned out, I'm happy with how it turned out. Joaquin played in that, Becca played in that, and Slavic played in that. I felt like talking about dealing with themes of horror, I was really happy with that because I wanted to tackle themes of abuse. And it just so happened in the middle of running that Leaving Neverland documentary came out, and I watched that, and it was just this weird, like, perfect storm of like me wanting to tackle like the trials and tribulations that ghouls have. And that's another form of horror, but also with horror, you can show light. So like contrast. So you're able to like, you know, even bring some light to some hard subjects, and I'm really happy with that. And we got other one shots that'll be happening. I mean, just it's going to be going through. That's one thing we're really trying to do. We have a Call of Cthulhu, My Little Sister Will Make You Suffer, which me, Quinn, and Mitch are playing in this Saturday, which Craig's going to be storytelling. So we got a lot going on. Just expect something new every week is coming out from Twin Cities by Night, and we're always like brainstorming, and we're always got like, we're not stopping, man. We're always trying to get better.
We got quite the backlog of stuff that we're going to get to someday.
Someday, yeah. Like don't worry. There's not going to be a moment where Twin Cities by Night is going to put out a tweet and be like, well, we ran out of ideas. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to ever happen, man. We've already like, there's talks of like a Werewolf for Apocalypse game that Becca might run, Victorian 2, fucking Mage game I'm going to run. Andrew's talking about maybe running like a fucking Dallas Fort Worth by Night. Like there's just so much shit like that we want to, and it's good, man. Cause in the end, this is just a gang playing games and wanting to share with people. And it's just, I'm really happy that I'm part of it. And I owe these guys and gals a ton, so much appreciated of them.
Yes, and just for the record, I'm going to say that I heartily recommend the Twin Cities by Night channel. I've not seen all of the actual plays. The ones I've seen have been thoroughly enjoyable. I've seen, like I said earlier, Joaquin's diluted story for Victorian Age Vampire. I have seen the 3 Vampire the Masquerade Twin Cities by Night arcs almost to completion. I've got on my list of things to do. It's a very long list, unfortunately. Demon the Fallen, which was recommended to me by Chris the last time we had a chat, recommended quite passionately at length. Because the stopwatch was broken that day.
Red light was broke.
Yeah. Also, The Ghoul's Fatal Addiction, because that's really interesting to me. I heard about a film a few months back that I've still not had a chance to see that I quite fancy seeing. I don't know if either of you have seen it. Judas Goat?
I have not seen it myself, no.
Have you heard of it?
I can't say I've ever heard of it.
No, I can't say I have.
It was part of a Humble Bundle offer for Vampire the Masquerade role-playing games, and I think it is available on the Steam platform for sale for a couple of dollars or something like that. And the idea is a Judas Goat is a goat that is trained to lead goats into a slaughterhouse. So that basically it's trained to go into the slaughterhouse, and if it does that, it's spared, and the other goats follow it because of their herd mentality, and they trust because another goat's doing it. And the film is like a 40-minute thing where you're basically watching a ghoul. I don't know if they ever used the term ghoul or anything like that, leading humans to his vampiric masters. I don't know if it specifically references vampiric clans, but people I know that have watched it or reviewed it actually talk about it as if, even if it's not a World of Darkness film, it would pass quite well for one. And it's not a particularly long one, so actually I reckon you probably get more out of your Ghoul's Fatal Addiction story arc. And despite
I just looked it up for myself, and it says it's been distributed by White Wolf Entertainment.
Well, there we go.
I gotta watch it. How have I not seen this, dude? Damn.
I don't know. It's you and I travel in the same circles.
I'm a poser, man. I'm a poser, dude. But,
like, I don't have time for that sort of stuff.
I guess that's another thing too. So many games, so little time.
Yeah, tell me about it. I also want to try and get some time to watch your Juarez by Night, because I'm not a massive Sabat fan, which for viewers, because actually a lot of people that check out my channel and read my website don't know World of Darkness particularly well. So this interview is as much for their benefit as anything else. There are a number of factions in Vampire the Masquerade. The Sabat are probably the more vicious. They're the most vicious faction. That's not to say that there's a good faction, because the other faction is more insidious. And that's the one I tend to play in because I like that, the insidious and politicking one. I'm not overly keen on the Sabbat, but actually from the way it was your Juarez on Fire game, it sounded really, really interesting. So yeah, I've got that to add to my list. Yeah.
If I could say something real quick about Wars, and it won't be a red light moment, that has another meaning, I guess. But we just had someone who just discovered us recently, who listened to our first 2 story arcs to Homecoming and, Negligence and Homecoming, and asked what to listen to next. And someone told to listen to Wars on Fire. And all I can say about Wars on Fire, yes, it is a Sabbat game. Yes, it has some brutal moments, but like it is one of the deepest, like philosophical, like character delving into games that I've ever ran. And the thing that makes Wars really special to my heart, and I'm not saying this lightly, like I say this 100% sincerity, is the fact that that game was by far 75% characters and players and 25% me, meaning that like a good chunk of that story was character development. And like some of the deepest fucking, like, after listening to Wars, it's really hard for me to listen to other Vampire actual plays, just because like how the players took these characters and just like delved deeper and deeper. And if you like any of our other Vampire the Masquerade stuff and love like the kind of vibe, watch Wars on Fire, because it is so much more than just a, quote unquote Sabbat kill things game. It is the game. And I'm sure maybe Joaquin will agree with me that a lot of people who weren't even playing in that game, who are in our group, say is where we turned the corner, where we found what Twin Cities by Night is. That was the game where we were like, this is who we are, this is how we play, and this is what we are going to be in the future. So I always recommend that one for people to watch. So it started off meant to be a hack and slash little mini series and became this huge existential, like fucking like philosophical, like just, oh man, I love it.
All right, cutting you off there.
There we go.
Okay. Actually, I think probably now's about as good a time for me to say thank you very much, Chris, Joaquin. This has been a pleasure to talk to you for the last, I guess, nearly an hour. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for having us.
Drink cold brew and listen to Black Sabbath. Have a good night.
and learn when it is acceptable to cut people off.
Yeah.
Oh, I know that. I'm just letting you talk, because an interview is very much like a role-playing game. If you guys are talking, it means I've got to do squat.
So it's just up to me to keep an eye on them. Okay, I see then.
Yeah.
There you go.
See, a good storyteller lets the other players drive the other players.
There you go. All right. Thank you for having us again, brother.
Okay, I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching, folks. Bye for now.